Hello, lovelies. It's Hila here, Hila at home. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite book series that has been made into a TV show called Outlander. And as you know from previous years, I will do reviews when it comes out, particularly after it's been a long drOutlander. And we have had such a long drOutlander. So I was really looking forward to this premiere of season 6, episode 2. So I'm just going to briefly talk about it. I'll start off by just doing a very brief recap and then talk about some of the things that I like, some observations that I made, deviations from the book as well, because I have read the books. And so it's always quite interesting for me, being a big fan of the books initially, to see what they actually do with it. And I'm going to be doing that whilst I'm also doing my laundry, because that's multitasking for you. Okay, so season 6, episode 1 started off with a 1 hour, 20-minute episode. And basically, long and short of it, the first 22 minutes were in flashback in Adsmuir, which, to be honest with you, could have been done in 5 minutes. And I get that the whole point was to try and establish the rivalry between Tom Christie and Jamie, but it really felt incredibly indulgent. In previous seasons, when they've done Adsmuir, it's always been interesting because of the interplay between Lord John Grey and, who's thirsty for Jamie, and Jamie, who's like trying to fend off the thirstiness because he doesn't have he hasn't had good experiences with the chaps who have thirsted after him, for want of a better word. So this one was pretty boring in my estimation, and I think that it could have been done in 5 minutes. So then we move on. For the rest of the hour, we're back in North Carolina, in Fraser's Ridge. And it's basically got a lot of the daily life of Fraser's Ridge. So you're kind of seeing the homesteading stuff going on in the background. Claire is trying to distill some ether, and there's hints at the fact that Claire is probably not okay, because even Brianna tries to chat with her about, there was a time that she was saying she was okay, but she wasn't okay. And there's just a lot of stuff that is happening. Major McDonald turns up to offer Jamie the job of being the Indian agent. And then you also have, we also have Tom Christie, this chap from Adsmuir, who was in the flashback, rocking up and being very stiff upper lip about it. And he comes when Jamie isn't there and he's gone out with Claire, because basically Jamie has just been like Claire's shadow ever since the assault that happened to Claire in the previous episode. And so he's basically like keeping an eye on her, as you would do, which is very, very sweet. But Roger takes the opportunity to be the man and actually invite Thomas Christie to settle at Fraser's Ridge, which the best scene in the episode was when Jamie rocks up and there is Tom Christie. And the moment he walks in, there's like this sudden freeze descends upon there. And it's Roger, bless him, poor little Roger, wee Roger, as they call him in the books. He basically very proudly says, I told him that, any friend of yours is a friend of ours, so I've invited him to stay. And there's this whole eye play that Jamie does. And then Roger's like, permanently. And the way Jamie's eyes go like, literally, he's probably just dying to say, what the? Are you kidding me? But he can't say that, and I felt like that scene right there is such a great metaphor for the relationship between Jamie and Roger, because I feel like Roger constantly is trying to be the man that Jamie is, but he constantly fails at it. And it's not his fault. It's because, he grew up in the future, and then he's coming back to a place where men have to be men, and being a historian is not exactly going to help you survive in the wilds of North Carolina. So anyway, I thought that was really, really funny, that particular scene. That was my favorite scene out of everything in this. So then very quickly it's established that, basically Tom Christie envies Jamie because he's constantly trying to be a leader. He's constantly trying to be the alpha, but Jamie is kind of like always showing him that he's actually a beta. And so he doesn't like that because in his mind, he thinks that he's an alpha. And so there's a lot of snide little remarks that he throws towards Jamie and all that, which kind of shows how very un-alpha, unmanly he is, right? Because he knows that he can't go up against Jamie because he'll just get beat down to a pulp. I forgot to tell you with the Asmio scene, they also included a whipping scene. So we got to be reminded that Jamie's got all those scars on his back, which I was a little bit like, we know all this stuff. You don't need to echo back to all of that, thing that happened. I thought it was unnecessary. Personally, I didn't feel like it added anything to the story. But hey ho, they want to remind us that he's got these scars. Although there was a really nice little scene where Tom Christie throws this thingy about a scar after Claire has just done some stitching on his hand. And he says, at least it's an honorable scar. At which point, Jamie just is like, and then he closes the door. And bless her, Claire does exactly what I would do if my husband was, my husband's honor was besmirched like that. And she was like, what is he talking about? Those are honorable scars. And I thought, oh, okay, I can see why they included the whipping scene at the beginning so that we can be reminded that they're scars. And it made that scene all the more elevated. So what else did we have? We also had causes for concern with Massily and Fergus, which I was quite disappointed with that, but I'll get into that later. So Massily is heavily pregnant now, and there seems to be indications that there's domestic abuse going on there, as well as alcoholism on the part of Fergus. And then we also have Roger being overly keen to help a widowed mom. And honestly, it's like Roger doesn't learn. Remember that time with Buck, Mackenzie's wife, who was a widow not quite a widow. She was traveling by herself on the boat. And he nearly got hanged, nearly died because he was meddling with, a woman who was in need of a man, because, this is the 1700s, the women that had children, they needed to have a man in order to survive. That's just the way it is. That was what life was like. And he ought to be more careful. So in this particular one, this woman, the last scene that we see her where Roger helps her with a naughty kid, she basically gives him the eyes and she's thirsty. There was a lot of thirsting in this episode. And I thought, honestly, Roger, you should really know better. Brianna should be the one that's actually chatting with this woman and being the interface for whatever help you want to give her. So I can see that there's a cause of concern over there as well. And so there's the Massily cause for concern. And then we had Jamie refusing Major McDonald's offer to become the Indian agent, and McDonald constantly coming back to offer him that. And at one of the points at which he was offering him, one of the Brown brothers, the surviving Brown brothers, Lionel's brother, rocks up with his committee of safety, wanting to go after Alan, because it turns out that Alan, the snivelly little-faced Tom Christie's son, had actually stolen this powder horn, which anybody seeing would have known that there was something dodgy about that because of the way that he was behaving. So far, he's been the weakest performer, I think, in this episode. But then it turns out that he'd stolen it from one of the Brownses. And when he rocks up, Claire, almost like she flips and she can't even bear to look at him, and she just walks away, disappears completely, which is very unlike Claire, because usually she's always there to stand next to Jamie, whatever is going on, right? And so she walks away, which is the beginning of sort of like there's something wrong here. Claire is not as good as we think. She as much as he's saying that she is. And and then there's this face-off between Tom Christie and Jamie about punishing Tom Christie's son, because ultimately Jamie is like, this is my land, okay, so I'm Big Daddy, Okay, and when Big Daddy says he's going to do this, you got to listen to this. But Tom Christie is like, yeah, no, but God is the Big Daddy, and this is my son and stuff like that. And Jamie's like, yeah, but you needed my help and you came to my land. And it's quite interesting because it's like there's this constant backing and forth thing, which I think takes up the whole episode. So mostly the episode to me was mostly about Jamie because he's the one that is juggling so much stuff. He has to deal with the Browns, he has to deal with Tom Christie, and he has to deal with all of these other things to do with running a homestead and dealing with Major McDonald and Governor Tyrone. But the one thing that he really wants to do, the only thing that he really would love to drop everything else for, is to just look after Claire because he can sense that something is wrong with her and he's just trying his best to be there. But there's all of these things that are pulling at him that have to be done. So much so that by the end of it, Major McDonald's basically says that if Jamie doesn't become the agent, they're going to get this brown guy to be the agent. And Jamie's just like, that brown guy is just such a D-bag. There is no way that we're going to let him. So then he takes on this job that he didn't want to take on, and it's going to take him away from Claire. And, and he's also got Fergus to deal with because he can see that something is up with Fergus. And he's trying to be like, don't drink, be there for your family and stuff like that. So it's all about, I feel like the season has been set up. My expectation is that this is going to be very much a Jamie season as well. But of course, the finishing bit, which was very, very dark, and that's another thing that I didn't like about this episode. I didn't appreciate that it's the first episode. It's a 1 hour, 20-minute episode. It's been such a long drOutlander. As a fan, I would have really loved to finish episode 1 on a high. But no, Claire has a nightmare in which she's got like the attacks on her constantly repeating, and she actually dips into her own supply and uses the anesthesia that was introduced at the beginning of the episode, and then she just knocks her out. And it was just such a really dark way to go. I wasn't expecting that because there's nothing like that in the books. To be honest with you, in the books, Claire is a little bit of a Mary Sue in the sense that she goes through a lot of stuff and has a lot of things thrown at her, but she always comes on the other side really positive, ready to go on to be a great partner and wife and healer and all of that. So I was not expecting that hit me by the side. I was like, whoa, what? Book Claire would probably not do that for her own things. Book Claire would be like, oh, I may knock myself out now, but somebody might need my help. Or if I use this app and then it's not available for somebody else to use. So that took me for 10, but I didn't like there was so much darkness with everything. And the pacing was just a little bit off for me, like, especially the fact that they took so long with the first 22 minutes. And I was just kind of like, I want to see what's going to happen, the pacing was a little bit off for me. And it kind of felt like they spent a lot of time on things that really weren't necessary, like the whole Asmere stuff, and things that they could have spent more time on, like with the hog roast. I actually wanted to see the people sitting around eating and the little bobs that would have been traded and things like that. Didn't get to see that. And I didn't get to see more of Lizzie. I was hoping to see more of Lizzie. She was just sort of like floating around in the background, and there's something really different about her and her character. And I was like, oh, that's a shame that we didn't get to see, more of that. So I felt like overall there was more darkness, and whether that's setting up the rest of the season, I'm not sure that I'm going to be a very, very happy bunny about that. Other observations. I don't like the new song. It might be that it will take me time to get used to it, but I still think that the OG from season 1 is just the best. I mean, to this day, I still have a playlist thing where I actually just play it because I absolutely love it, and I love how it finishes off with the dancers doing their thing. So I wasn't too impressed with the new song. It makes the one from season 4, the Drums of Autumn one, much better because they did like a prairie bluegrass thingy with it, and I actually quite liked that one. But this new one, I didn't like it. What else? For big fans of the Claire and Jamie loving, you won't be disappointed. There's a extended scene, which I think that they'd given out as a teaser or something like that. So going forward is going to be quite interesting to see how they deal with the Fergus issue. So I said I wasn't happy with that, with the way that they just presented his alcoholism. And you have to remember the last time that we saw Fergus was in season 5, just after they caught up with the Browns' gang that had abducted Claire. And he was very much part of the group when Jamie utters the order where he's like, kill them all. Fergus is one of those very clear-minded, very clear that his family had been violated and he was going to avenge his family. So there was no indication at all that there was any of this stuff going on. In the books, there is a slow build-up to how he gets to that point. And part of that is that Marcelly, one of the children that they have, Jermaine, is actually a dwarf during a time when there weren't a lot of dwarfs around. So they were dealing a lot with that fact and him feeling that he isn't going to be able to protect his child and things like that. So there was a lot of things that were going on that led to him to go down to this path where he was feeling like he's not enough of a man. He's not able to protect because he's just got the one hand and things like that. And in this episode, it just felt to me like it was just plonked in just for convenience sake. I thought that, take less time from the Asmir scenes and build up this, him becoming this alcoholic to the point where he rocks up to his father's hog roast completely drunk. And one thing Fergus has always been consistent with throughout all of the seasons is that he has always had so much respect and love for Jamie because Jamie effectively saved him as a child from growing up in a brothel. So that one was a little bit of but it is episode 1, so there's plenty of time for the writers to redeem themselves, to fix this, and what have you. Despite the fact that it was a dark episode, and I thought that it was just an okay, I didn't think it was outstanding. I think the scene where Jamie has to deal with Roger being like, yes, I invited this person to stay, and he's like, the I play. That is kind of worth it for me. Yeah, so those are my thoughts on Outlander Season 6, Episode 1. Let me know what your thoughts were down below. Did you enjoy it? Did you find it too dark? And did you enjoy the Super Bumper episode? Personally, I think 40 minutes could have actually done it and it would have been better paced. Until I see you next time, I wish you blue skies, health, and happiness. Bye. I need to go put away the laundry now.